going to be looking at the industrial Techno Drums template for Ableton Live. We're going to be looking at group processing for hard techno drums, some kick synthesis, and when you might want to capture that to audio and the benefits of doing so. We'll also look at a lot of the other percussion and the processing of this to achieve this hard, gritty techno sound. So I have navigated to the folder. If you were to download this product, you can just navigate to your Ableton folder and locate it. I've got it here, and we can just drop in the whole groups or individual elements of the groups. To demonstrate that, I drag that in here and it loads up all our clips. And in the arrangement view, we have a very basic arrangement, kind of a starting point, if you like. This product can be used as like a turbocharged sketchpad to really quickly get ideas down. So in terms of the group processing, we have got the kick bass, and that's all processed separately, and then there is some processing on each of the groups also. So the reason I mention that is we can actually say pick and choose. So if I wanted the kick bass from one, and then I can go to 2 and select the hat clap group. And because I'm in this stacked one, and they are all in the same part of the timeline. If you open this one, they're in more of a cascading effect. And in this project, there is also send and return effects that have automation on them, further enhancing the structure. If I just move this one out of the way for the time being and carry on, so I could go to 4 and we'll get the effects from 4. So it's mainly drums, and then there's a few little extra effects here and there as well. We'll go for the cymbals from 4 as well. And we can quickly kind of come up with fresh beats. Just bear in mind when doing it this way, we don't have that final group processing. So I'll remove those now and we'll just focus on one. In terms of the processing, we have this rack on the kick and bass. And then group processing as well. So let's quickly listen without the full group processing. And then also without just the kick bass processing. So we can really hear that that is doing a lot. So let's dive in and have a look at that. So lots of heavy lifting here done by the multiband dynamics and the overdrive. We also have the redux here for a bit of bit reduction, giving it a nice gritty feel, and then just a touch of EQ afterwards. And you'll see we've mapped a lot of the controls to macros, and then the slow cut actually is just for creating breakdowns in your tracks. So if I turn all these off, you'll notice it's hardly coming through at all in comparison. And when we turn the multiband dynamics on, it really pulls out the sound. So in terms of the layers here, we have our kick and then a kick layer, which is kind of like a hard style, hardcore kick, and then the bass. So this is a sample from our free pack MS Weapons. Lots of different sounds essentially captured from the MS-20, and then it's processed more to give it more of a bass-like feel. And then the sidechain actually needs setting up. So again, I can just drag the sidechain trigger from here, and then on the bass, select sidechain trigger. and we see that just allows the transient of the kick to come through. And then we have this grit layer. And that is the kick. So this one that we're going to look at in a minute, we are taking the audio from there, and then we have an amp, and then basically a series of reverb and delay plugins, then going into more saturation and distortion. And then this little rack here, you can download for free from zonalaudio.com. It's basically just a really handy dynamics rack. So if I put on the other processing, and then so instead of it being a kind of just straight smeared reverby rumble, we're giving it a bit of groove and a bit of pump. So that with all these in together. By the way, my top mixing tip for Ableton is pull up these channels. We can get a much better view of what's going on. So the MD amount is mapped here. It goes to a max of 70. And you can really hear how it's pulling out those higher frequency. Makes it sound really energetic, really fast, and also gives it a bit of groove. And then we've actually got the out high mapped here. So you can tailor how much of that you want. Just realised I've got the kick playing at the same time, and that's why it sounded so weird. I'll explain very shortly as to why there is two kicks in this particular example. And then overdrive mapped to a macro, and the limiter, and also the limiter release. So by default, the release is set to auto, but in this example, we've actually mapped a macro to the release. When using limiters, we can get a kind of harder, louder sound by using a fast release. You need to be careful not to go too quick because that can introduce some unpleasant distortion. So you can hear it gives it a bit more life and a bit more energy and a bit more bounce. So why do we have two instances of the kick in this example? Well, we have synthesized the kick, and the result of the kick when it's synthesized is basically a little bit irregular. There is a very slight variation in the sound, and it sounds good as it is, but what we can do when we've dialed in a kick we like, by the way, this is wavetable, and again we've mapped some macros. This is a preset that we've made. There will be a wavetable pack coming soon, so keep your eyes out for that. And we can basically design our kick. So once we've designed a kick that we're happy with, it is a good idea to bounce it to audio. So to do that, I'm going to create a new channel and set the input to be resampling. If you don't see this panel here, the mixer panel, we just want to click this little IO in the corner, and then we want to record enable, and then just hit record. Okay, so soloing the kick there. So here is our kick. So now we have much more control over our kick, and we can do some further processing if we feel it necessary. If we look at the kick here in the example, you'll notice this one, kick change. Let's just take a listen to how that sounds. So especially with a little bit of reverb, we get a slightly different character and tone each time the kick hits. So in this example that I recorded earlier, I've chosen that kick for the most part. But again, if we scroll through, we get a slightly different kick each time. And if we listen to this change with everything else in, so a really nice way to get a unique kick that is going to work for your track. So let's have a look at some of the other layers now. We have this perk rhythm. And in this example, most of the hats are actually synthesized from Operator. So we're playing quite a simple MIDI pattern, and we have two oscillators stacked, a sine wave modulated by noise, which is why we're getting this noisy sound. And yeah, we have mapped the macro of the LFO, which is mapped to this filter, so we can get some quick changes. And then we can see the decay is automated. Let's have a listen to what that does. So having that frequency automation of the filter, then pushing into overdrive, delay, more saturation, and then there's a sidechain that we can set up again with the sidechain trigger. And then we're using this free rack, which you can download now from zonalaudio.com. It's just a really handy dynamics rack, and you'll see that it's featured quite a bit more in the project, and just helps control the dynamics essentially. So adding to the sidechain, and also giving it more of a 16th rhythm. So when pushing delay into that, it gives it a nice kind of choppy feel. So let's have a look at the hat. Again, synthesized from Operator. Really simple, it's just noise pushed into a low pass filter, MS2 with quite a bit of drive, then pushed into more saturation in terms of the pedal, and then some EQ. Again, some handy macros have been mapped and automated. Very similar thing with the second hat. So this one is a 16th note pattern. Notice the MIDI here really helps the groove of the overall beat. And then again, using the chop and change for some extra dynamics. So if we listen to this alone, so we can see the decay is mapped here, or automated, I should say. So when there is moments when the decay is longer, the dynamics are still controlled. We're still getting that very choppy sound. And next we have an open hat. This is just using the 909 core kit. Both this and the 707 kit are used quite often. Very little processing on this one, but the MIDI pattern, again, is quite important to giving the groove of the track. We've got this kind of down, up motion of the velocity chord. we solo the kick. And then the ride from the 909 again. Not a massive amount of processing, heavy saturation with the soft clip, and then some EQ afterwards. And then there's a compressor here, which is actually sidechaining from the kick here. And there are pros and cons to sidechaining using the kick and using a sidechain trigger. In this instance, I'm happy that the kick is a suitable trigger for this sidechain. But basically what it means using the kick is that when the kick stops playing, the sidechaining will stop and we get this kind of breathing effect. So you see here, when the sidechain signal drops out, we get the transient of the ride coming through. So that can be really desirable in certain circumstances. Okay, next is the snare. Again, 909 kit, going into overdrive pretty heavily. Then some reverb. You'll notice a very long decay time, but then we have a gate cutting that off, and then some EQ. So if I take this processing off, really basic snare, this really pumps it up, and doing that before the reverb gives the reverb even more harmonics to push through. And yeah, without the gate, we get that long reverb tail. So putting this gate on gives the feeling of a really big, roomy snare, but it cuts off the tail so it's not getting in the way and muddying up our mix. Okay, next let's look at the noise perk. So this is using a sample from our pack Error Drums. A really interesting pack that can be used for all sorts of different styles of electronic music. There's also some effects from that pack used in other parts of this project, but the sample on its own again, notice the MIDI, we've got different velocities. And just so you can hear what the sample sounds like with the full release. So you'll hear some movement there. We've again used an LFO on a filter. So this is set to be at 0.15 Hertz. And then we have the random pattern, and it's sent to the filter, which is on the bandpass mode, and we've got the OSR. We can add some drive here as well if we want, but that just moves it around. And then we basically have the same thing again, a bandpass filter, OSR, we've added the drive this time, and some LFO to that. So a lot of movement going on before we hit this echo. And the way we are changing the filter sound automatically, then pushing into these two echoes, in fact, gives a really kind of funky feeling to it. Again, we'll set the side chain up. So without the echo. And then just some EQ to make sure we're not interfering with the lows at all. Let's look at this texture one now. Again, samples from a mixture of Error Drums and MS Weapons, which is a free pack you can download. So without processing. And then So no actual sidechain compression here, just using the chop and chain again in this instance. So you can really hear what the rack's doing there. Gives it a nice choppy, energetic sound. This one, just a loop from Driving Techno Essentials. Minimal processing there, just taking out a little bit of the fundamental sound. And then some of them have some slight musical element just to keep it interesting. On this one, we are just using bass shot from Driving Techno Essentials. There's some other samples you could switch between in there as well. Again, saturation, distortion, EQ for the processing. Cool, and then finally we just have a clap fill, which again, 909 core kit, it's really good. And a riser from Driving Techno Essentials. Again, not much processing here. In terms of the clap, we've added some overdrive, a little bit of short reverb, and then some EQ to take out the lows and just add a little bit of crispiness. And then let's listen to everything together again. So we've been listening to that without the final group processing there. Let's have a listen with and without. It can be really beneficial to process all of your drum sounds with the same processing. Typically, saturation, EQ, maybe more saturation, maybe some compression, maybe some more EQ. And then just hitting a limiter at the end of that group can be really effective in getting a nice loud. And also we can set the ceiling to be -8 dB, which is always going to be a good level for our drums. You might want to alter it slightly in the final mix, but then we can add a little bit of gain as well if needed. But just to go through this piece by piece. So we're on the analog clip, 3 dB of drive, and then compensating on the output by -3. And obviously you can blend this into taste. You could add more drive, probably going to want to compensate that on the output. Just a little bit of honky frequencies taken out here. Subcut at 30 Hertz. Typically you're going to want to do that. We've also done it on the kick bass. It's actually at 35, but there will still be a little bit of low end coming through. So we're just kind of reinforcing a little bit of extra to the highs. And then the compression, we've got a very fast release here on a ratio of 4, medium attack. And both the saturation and the glue compression just does exactly that, actually, just glues the sounds together. And then we're enforcing that with a limiter. Typically, I'd say a maximum of -6 dB threshold. You can go further, but you might kind of lose some transients of your sound. Okay, let's just look a little closer at the kick and bass. So we have the kick that we have synthesized and then recaptured in audio. And then the next one is 2 kicks layered. We actually have a few to choose from, some distorted kicks here. So kind of that hardcore, hardstyle vibe. And that's just layered on top. So it's not coming through very obviously, but when we play through here with the group processing, and in this instance 2 lots of group processing, when some elements drop out, it allows other elements to come forward. And that's what we've got here when the kick layer plays repeatedly when the other elements of the low end are out. So again, can be quite a desirable effect, but something to be wary of. And the next layer is the bass. So this is a sample from MS Weapons. It's just a really bassy kick drum, basically. And then we have give it a significant amount of attack. So we're not getting that initial transient when we've moved the start point. So on its own. So really kind of heavy analog kick drum. And then adding quite a bit of attack and just taking that transient away, and then basically using the amp and corpus to make it even more subby. Sidechain compression, and then taking out any high end. Again, if we listen to how this affects that sound, really quite a lot. And then again, the grit layer with all this. Basically saturation, delay, reverb, more saturation, then dynamics processing. And then we want to set this input as well to be the sidechain trigger. So yeah, that multi-band dynamic's doing a lot of the work to kind of bring the front of the kick forward into the mix. Gives a nice kind of futuristic industrial sound. On top of this, there is several more. Let's take a quick look at number 2. So the kick from this one is also synthesized, this time from Operator. This rack you can actually download for free if you go to zonalaudio.com/UKR-free. And yeah, you can get this rack totally for free. And it's really great for creating unique kick and rumbles both together. So it's heavily processed anyway. As you can see, there's quite a lot going on. We've added a layer here, which I'll explain shortly. And then there is some processing, but maybe not as heavy as the other one, because this one is already got the kick and rumble processed really heavily in one track. Let's have a listen. So a really slamming kick. I won't go too much into the design. There is a separate video on this that you can check out. We'll leave a link in the description. But yeah, a nice, heavy, rumbly kick. And we can add more rumble here if we want. And then the kick layer. So this is a effect from Error. And we're using the filter envelope here to give it that kind of smashing, hammering sound. So with no filter. And then we're taking away any kind of harmonics. We just. And then in terms of the processing for those two, much less extreme, just taking away some of the honky and sibilant frequencies here. The saturator is on hard curve this time, just 1 dB of drive and only 35% mix. We can obviously go further with this if we'd like. Just notice how much gain it's adding and how much more we're driving into the limiter with a higher dry wet. So we're using mainly samples in the hat clap here, all from Driving Techno Essentials, apart from this one, which is a sample pack that never got released essentially, but there's quite a few of these samples. They are essentially percussions driven through a old Alesis reverb and the Electron. So really gritty, dirty samples. Okay, so in the percussion, we have some group processing. We're using a MIDI pattern here of different samples that are kind of giving a call and response. And then process with some saturation and EQ. So without that. That is going into more saturation. We need to set this from the sidechain trigger. And then in terms of the texture, so 2 samples from Driving Techno Essentials just to give a nice little bit of grit and groove. Again, quite a lot of processing. Just a random texture effect. So we've actually used the chop and chain both before and after some extra processing here. Let's listen to that on its own. So just a random atmosphere sample basically, which is then chopped on 16th notes and then sidechained on quarter notes. That goes into a vocoder which smears the sound. Same with the compression. Sorry, same with the chorus and erosion. And then chopping and chaining again. Just for a nice little bit of extra texture. So the ride this time is from the 707 kit. We've actually smashed it pretty hard into the pedal whilst also giving it a lot of drive on the way in. And then again, we'll set the sidechain trigger. So without the processing. So the idea here is to get a really dirty sounding ride, essentially. Heavy distortion here for a ride. And then because of that, we want to deal with the extra harmonics that we're pushing through with the saturation / distortion. Let's have a listen to the synth hit. This is a lead from Driving Techno Essentials that has been put into a sampler and used as a hit. And then we have automated the release, and you'll hear where that kind of comes into play just to make it a little bit more exciting at times. So within the project, there is some kind of synthy bits in there, but very short percussive sounds. This is for drums, will let you do the synth work. The most interesting part about the processing of this one is we have a dry and a wet. So dry has some EQ, drum bus, and then EQ again. Incidentally, when doing any kind of harmonic excitement, we are doing it usually across the frequency spectrum. So we can see, even though we have the cut here, with drum bus, we're adding quite a bit more lows back in. So we're passing those again. So here's where the release goes up. And in the overall project, in the main project, if you were to get to this one here, there's more send and return effects, which is automated for more kind of intensity in the breakdowns. And then just again, some really basic effects to keep the overall sound interesting. These effects are really cool. These ones are from Error Drums. There you have it, industrial techno drums. Two different ways of synthesizing the kick there. For some of the other ones, the technique is slightly different. So for example here, we've essentially just got audio and it's blended together with more group processing. And then finally, we'll look at 4. And again, we're working with samples, but in MIDI this time. So lots of layering going on here. The rumble is created from another kick, which has then got lots of the mids and highs taken out. Again, we've got a bit of attack and we're just removing that initial transient. So on this, we've actually got a kick and a clap layered with a distorted kick. And the bass, again, we're just using another kick drum, increasing the attack. And interestingly, with the MIDI note here, because the attack is a bit slower, we want the note to be coming in around this point. And then again, we're using like a hammer type of layer. So this is an impact, and we're using the frequency envelope to give that hammering sound. Then again, we've got the grit layer. So this is from the kick, and then starting off with a delay at 100% wet. That's really important for these kind of processes. Your first effect should be either a reverb and a delay on 100% wet. And then we're doing lots of saturation, distortion, EQ, reverb, etc. And again, it's pushing all these elements into more saturation, multiband compression, overdrive, EQ. And again, we've mapped some handy macros here so we can just dial in the amount that you want. And then that is being further exaggerated by the processing on the whole group. So there you have it, industrial techno drums. I hope you found this informative, educational, useful. That's it for now. Cheers. Bye.